Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at attention in the briefing room at Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach. At 32 years old, she was one of only a handful of female F-35 Lightning II pilots in the United States Navy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes focused straight ahead as her commanding officer spoke. "Listen up, people," Commander James Harkin said, his voice sharp and commanding. "We've got a situation developing overseas. SEAL team operations in hostile territory. This is a support mission. Air cover only. No heroics." Sarah had heard those words before. No heroics. It was always the same message when she was in the room. She knew what some of them thought, that she was too emotional, too soft, that women didn't belong in fighter jets. After the briefing ended, Sarah gathered her materials and headed toward the door. She heard the whispers behind her. They weren't even trying to be quiet anymore. "Hope she doesn't freeze up there," Lieutenant Marcus Webb said to another pilot. "Last thing those SEALs need is someone who can't handle the pressure." "I heard she only got her wings because of diversity quotas," another voice added. "Navy's going soft." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. She had been dealing with comments like these for 5 years. Since the day she graduated at the top of her class from flight school, there had always been someone ready to dismiss her achievements, someone ready to say she didn't earn it, that she didn't belong. She had proven herself dozens of times, perfect flight records, successful missions, commendations for skill and bravery, but it was never enough. In their eyes, she would always be the woman who took a spot from a man. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her small apartment off base. The walls were bare except for a single photograph. It showed her father, Colonel Robert Mitchell, in his Marine Corps dress uniform. He had been killed in action when Sarah was 16 years old. His death had broken something in her family, but it had also planted a seed. Sarah had promised herself she would serve. She would honor his memory. She would prove that his daughter had the same courage, the same strength, the same honor that he had. But tonight, sitting in the quiet darkness, she felt the weight of it all. The constant doubt, the whispers, the way men like Webb looked at her like she was a liability instead of an asset. Her phone buzzed, a text from her younger brother, Danny. "Hey sis, saw your post. You doing okay?" Sarah smiled sadly. Danny always knew when she was struggling. He was studying engineering at Virginia Tech, carrying on the family's tradition of service in his own way. "I'm fine," she typed back. "Just tired, big mission coming up." "You'll do great, you always do. Dad would be proud." Sarah stared at those words for a long moment. Dad would be proud. She had to believe that. She had to hold on to it. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the hangar before dawn. She always did. She liked the quiet hours before the base came alive. It gave her time to run through her pre-flight checks, to connect with her aircraft, to prepare her mind. The F-35 Lightning II was a marvel of engineering, stealth technology, advanced sensors, weapon systems that could strike with precision from miles away, and at its heart, a radar system so powerful it could see through clouds, through darkness, through almost anything. But there was a catch. The F-35's active electronically scanned array radar, when pushed to its maximum power setting, had a dangerous side effect. It could interfere with friendly communications. It could jam systems. It could create electronic chaos across multiple frequencies. That's why there was a standing order. Never activate full power mode without explicit authorization. The risk of friendly fire, of confusion in the battle space, was too high. Pilots called it going dark, because once you flipped that switch, you were on your own, cut off, making decisions without support. Sarah ran her hand along the smooth surface of her jet. She had never activated that mode, never needed to, and she hoped she never would. "Mitchell." She turned to see Commander Harkin approaching, a tablet in his hand. "Sir," she said, straightening. "Your mission brief just got updated. The situation overseas is deteriorating faster than expected. SEALs are going deep into enemy territory. Your job is to provide air cover from 20,000 feet. Monitor their progress. Be ready to engage if they need support. Understood? Yes, sir. And Mitchell, Harkin's face was stern. By the book, no unnecessary risks. Those men down there are counting on solid, reliable support, not cowboy stunts. I understand, sir. As Harkin walked away, Sarah felt the familiar sting of his words. He never talked to the male pilots that way. He never questioned their judgment before they even took off. But she pushed the feeling down. This wasn't about her ego. This was about the mission, about the men on the ground who needed her. 6 hours later, Sarah was 35,000 feet above the Mediterranean Sea, her F-35 cutting through the night sky like a shadow. Below her, the dark waters reflected no light. Ahead, the coast of a hostile nation appeared on her instruments. Raptor 6, this is Overwatch, the voice crackled in her headset. SEALs are on the ground. Mission is proceeding as planned. Maintain current position and monitor. Copy that, Overwatch, Sarah replied, her voice calm and professional. She could see them on her display. 267 Navy SEALs divided into multiple teams, moving through mountainous terrain toward their objective. It was one of the largest SEAL operations in recent history. High risk, high reward. Sarah's job was simple: stay high, stay invisible, watch. If anything went wrong, she could provide cover fire, but the mission planners expected everything to go smoothly. For 2 hours, everything did. The SEAL teams moved like ghosts through enemy territory. Sarah watched their progress on her instruments, her hands steady on the controls, her mind focused. And then everything changed. Raptor 6, be advised. SEALs have encountered unexpected resistance. Multiple enemy units converging on their position. Sarah's heart rate quickened, but her voice remained steady. Copy, standing by. On her display, she could see it happening. The dots representing friendly forces were being surrounded by dozens of hostile contacts. It looked like a trap, like the enemy had been waiting. Overwatch, this is Raptor 6. I'm seeing heavy enemy movement. SEALs are going to be surrounded. Copy, Raptor 6. Hold position. Command is evaluating. Hold position. Sarah gritted her teeth. Those men were walking into an ambush, and she was being told to wait. Minutes passed. Each one felt like an hour. On her screen, the enemy forces were tightening the noose. Then the call came through, the one that changed everything. All units, SEALs are under heavy fire. Repeat, heavy fire. Air support requested immediately. Sarah's training took over. Overwatch, Raptor 6 is ready to engage, awaiting coordinates. But what came next made her blood run cold. Raptor 6, negative. Enemy has deployed advanced anti-aircraft systems. SAM sites active. You are not cleared to enter the engagement zone. Repeat, not cleared. Overwatch, those men need air support. Negative, Raptor 6. Risk is too high. Additional assets are being scrambled, but ETA is 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Sarah looked at her display. In 45 minutes, every SEAL down there could be dead. This was the moment when orders conflicted with conscience, when the safe choice meant abandoning men who had no other hope. Sarah's hand moved to the radar controls, to the forbidden switch that could change everything. She thought of her father, of the men on the ground, of every person who had ever doubted her. Sarah's finger hovered over the switch. Every part of her training screamed at her to follow orders, to stay in position, to wait for backup that might arrive too late. But every part of her heart told her something different. On her display, the situation was deteriorating by the second. The SEAL teams had been forced into a valley, surrounded on 3 sides by enemy forces. Tracer fire lit up her infrared sensors like a deadly light show. Men were dying down there. American warriors trapped and outgunned. Raptor 6, confirm your position. The voice from Overwatch was insistent. Maintain current altitude and coordinates. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She was doing calculations in her head. The enemy's surface-to-air missile systems were sophisticated, but they had limitations. They relied on tracking radar. They needed to lock onto a target. But what if the target was invisible? The F-35 stealth technology was designed to make it nearly undetectable to conventional radar. It was like a ghost in the sky. But there was a problem. The moment she turned on her own radar at full power, the moment she started actively scanning and targeting, she would light up like a Christmas tree. Every enemy system in range would see her. It would be suicide. Unless she was faster than they were. Unless she could strike before they could respond. Raptor 6, acknowledge, Overwatch demanded. Sarah took a breath. Overwatch, I'm going in. Negative, Raptor 6, you are not cleared, stand down. Those men need help now, not in 45 minutes, now. Mitchell, if you break protocol, you will face court-martial. Do you understand me? Sarah's jaw set. I understand perfectly, sir. Raptor 6 engaging. She cut the communication channel and pushed the throttle forward. The F-35 responded instantly, diving toward the combat zone at nearly supersonic speed. G-forces pressed her back into her seat, but she had trained for this. Her body was ready. Her mind was clear. As she descended, Sarah activated her weapon systems. Air-to-ground missiles locked and loaded. But there was a problem. The valley where the SEALs were trapped was narrow and steep. The enemy forces were mixed in close with friendly positions. She couldn't just drop bombs and hope for the best. She needed precision. She needed to see exactly where everyone was. She needed the radar. At 15,000 feet, Sarah's instruments began screaming warnings at her. Enemy SAM systems were active. They hadn't locked onto her yet, but they were searching, sweeping the sky with their electronic eyes looking for threats. She had seconds to make this work. Sarah's hand moved to the radar control panel. The forbidden switch was protected by a clear cover, marked with red warning labels. She flipped the cover open and paused for just a heartbeat. Her father's face flashed through her mind. His voice from years ago, telling her something she had never forgotten. Sarah, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. She flipped the switch. The F-35's radar exploded to life at full power. Instantly, her display lit up with information. She could see everything, every enemy position, every vehicle, every soldier, and more importantly, she could see the SEAL teams, highlighted in blue, clustered together in desperate defensive positions. But she had also just announced her presence to every enemy system within 50 miles. Alarms blared in her cockpit. Warning, missile lock. Warning, missile lock. 3 SAM sites had found her. Missiles were launching. Sarah didn't panic. She had trained for this scenario 100 times in simulators. She activated her countermeasures, releasing chaff and flares as she threw the F-35 into a series of violent maneuvers. The jet responded beautifully, twisting and diving in ways that would have torn apart older aircraft. One missile lost its lock, distracted by the chaff. Another exploded harmlessly 100 feet away, fooled by a flare, but the third missile was still tracking. Sarah pushed the F-35 into a dive so steep it felt like falling. The missile followed, its motor burning bright in the darkness. At the last possible second, Sarah pulled up hard, grunting against the G-forces that tried to push her consciousness away. The missile couldn't match her turn. It shot past her and slammed into the ground below, exploding in a shower of dirt and fire. But Sarah didn't have time to celebrate. She was now inside the engagement zone, and the enemy knew she was there. More missiles were launching. More guns were turning toward the sky. She had maybe 2 minutes before they overwhelmed her defenses. 2 minutes to save 267 lives. Sarah locked onto the first target, an enemy artillery position that was raining shells down onto the trapped SEALs. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision. Weapons lock. Fire. An air-to-ground missile dropped from her wing and streaked downward, its guidance system keeping it on target despite the chaos. 5 seconds later, the artillery position erupted in flame. Target 2, an enemy command vehicle coordinating the attack. Lock, fire, destroyed. Sarah's display showed more missiles launching at her. She released another round of countermeasures and jinked hard to the left, her body straining against the harness. Target 3, a machine gun nest that had the SEALs pinned down. She switched to her cannon, the 25 MGAU-22 mounted internally. The weapon roared to life, and a stream of high-explosive rounds tore through the enemy position. Warning, missile lock. Warning, missile lock. 2 more SAM missiles in the air. Sarah's countermeasures were running low. She wouldn't be able to keep this up much longer. But she wasn't done yet. She identified the SAM sites themselves. They were the real threat. As long as they were active, she was in danger. And if she went down, the SEALs would lose their only support. Sarah marked all 3 SAM locations on her targeting computer. It would take every remaining missile she had. She would be left with just her cannon, but it was the only way. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "Come on." She fired. 3 missiles launched in rapid succession, each one streaking toward a different SAM site. For a moment, everything seemed to happen in slow motion. She watched the missiles cut through the night, watched the enemy systems try to track them, watched as, one by one, they found their targets. 3 explosions lit up the valley floor. The SAM threat was neutralized. But Sarah's relief was short-lived. Her warning system screamed again, not missiles this time. Anti-aircraft guns, dozens of them, all firing in her direction. The sky around her lit up with tracer rounds. She pulled into a climb, trying to get above their range, but something struck her jet. A rattling bang echoed through the cockpit. Red lights flashed on her instrument panel. Warning, hydraulic failure. Warning, right engine damaged. Sarah's training kept her calm even as fear tried to creep in. One engine was failing. Her hydraulics were compromised. Her jet was dying. But below her, she could see on her radar that the SEAL teams were moving. They were breaking out of the trap. Her attack had given them the opening they needed. She activated her radio, broadcasting on the SEAL frequency. "Ground teams, this is Raptor 6. I've cleared a path to the northeast. Enemy forces are scattered. Extract now." A voice came back, rough and breathless. "Raptor 6, this is SEAL team leader. We copy. We're moving. Are you hit?" "I'm operational," Sarah lied. "Get your men out of there." She could hear the doubt in his voice. "Raptor 6, your signature is showing damage. What's your status?" "I said I'm operational. Now move." Sarah knew she was dying up here. Her jet was losing altitude. The right engine was completely dead now. The left engine was running hot, trying to compensate. She had maybe 5 minutes before she would have to eject. But 5 minutes was enough. She circled the valley, using her cannon to suppress any enemy forces that tried to regroup. Every burst of fire sent vibrations through her damaged aircraft. Every maneuver was harder than the last. On her radar, she watched the blue dots representing the SEALs reach the extraction point. She watched as helicopters swooped in to pull them out. She counted the seconds. One by one, the SEAL teams lifted off. One by one, they escaped. All 267 of them. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. She had done it. She had broken every rule, disobeyed direct orders, and activated a ban system, but she had saved them all. Warning, left engine failure imminent. The smile faded. Now came the hard part. "Raptor 6, this is Overwatch." The voice that came through was different now, calmer, more concerned. Sarah, we see your status. You need to eject. Head out to sea and eject. Sarah checked her instruments. The jet was barely responding. She was losing altitude fast. The Mediterranean was 30 miles away. She wouldn't make it. Overwatch, negative. I'm staying with the aircraft as long as possible. Going to try to find a landing site. Mitchell, there are no friendly landing sites in range. Eject now while you still can. But Sarah had already made her decision. If she ejected over land, she would be in enemy territory, alone, possibly injured. The SEALs were already extracted. There was no one left to rescue her. Better to try to save the jet. Better to try to make it to the water. Her altimeter showed 10,000 feet, 9,000, 8,000. The left engine sputtered and died. Sarah was gliding now. A $70 million fighter jet turned into a very expensive glider. She pushed the nose down, trying to maximize her distance. Every mile mattered. 7,000 feet, 6,000. The coastline appeared ahead, the dark waters of the Mediterranean, so close, but she was dropping too fast. 5,000 feet. Sarah's hand moved to the ejection handle. She would have to time this perfectly. Too early and she'd land in hostile territory. Too late and the ejection system might not work. 4,000 feet. The water rushed up to meet her. She was 3 miles from the coast, still over land. 3,000 feet. Come on, she whispered, just a little farther. 2,000 feet. The jet crossed the coastline. She was over water now, but barely. 1,000 feet. Sarah pulled the ejection handle. The canopy blew away in an explosive burst. Her seat rocketed upward, driven by powerful solid-fuel motors. G-forces slammed her into the seat harder than anything she had experienced in flight. For a moment, everything went black. Then she was falling. The parachute deployed automatically, jerking her upright. Below her, she watched her F-35 slam into the water in a tremendous splash. Sarah hung in the darkness, suspended between sky and sea, watching the ripples spread out from where her jet had gone down. The rescue helicopter found Sarah 40 minutes later. She was floating in her survival raft, soaked and exhausted but alive. The crew pulled her aboard without much ceremony. They wrapped her in a blanket and checked her for injuries. Nothing broken. A few bruises. Mild hypothermia. She had been lucky. But as she sat in the helicopter, wrapped in that scratchy military blanket, Sarah knew that luck was about to run out. The ride back to the USS Gerald R. Ford, the aircraft carrier serving as the mission's base of operations, took 90 minutes. No one spoke to her much. The rescue crew was professional but distant. She could see it in their eyes. They knew what she had done. They knew she was in trouble. When the helicopter touched down on the carrier deck, Sarah was met by 2 Marine guards and a Navy lieutenant commander she didn't recognize. "Captain Mitchell," the officer said formally, "you're to come with us. Commander Huckon wants to see you immediately." Sarah nodded and followed them below decks. The carrier was a floating city, home to 5,000 sailors and airmen. As Sarah walked through the corridors, she felt eyes on her. Word had already spread. The female pilot who had disobeyed orders, who had activated the forbidden radar system, who had lost a $70 million aircraft. They brought her to a small conference room. Inside, Commander Huckon was waiting along with Captain Thudda Murison, the carrier's commanding officer, and a Navy JAG attorney whose name tag read Ulta Rummaras. "Sit down, Mitchell," Huckon said coldly. Sarah sat. Her flight suit was still damp. Her hair had come loose from its bun. She probably looked like hell, but she met Huckon's eyes without flinching. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Huckon began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You directly disobeyed orders. You activated a band system without authorization. You endangered the entire mission with your reckless behavior, and you destroyed a $70 million aircraft." "I saved 267 lives," Sarah replied quietly. That's not the point. Hakan slammed his hand on the table. The point is that you don't get to make those decisions. You follow orders, you follow protocol. That's what keeps everyone safe. Captain Morrison held up a hand. Commander, let's keep this professional. He turned to Sarah, his face grave but not hostile. Captain Mitchell, I understand you believed you were acting to protect our forces, but you have to understand the position this puts us in. The radar system you activated was banned for good reasons. You jammed friendly communications. You created confusion across multiple units. It took us 20 minutes to sort out what was happening. Sir, Sarah said carefully, I made a judgment call. The SEALs were about to be overrun. The backup wouldn't arrive in time. I had the tools to help them and I used them. That wasn't your call to make, Hakan shot back. Ulta Ramaraz, the JAG attorney, spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm and measured. Captain Mitchell, I need to inform you that you're facing potential court-martial proceedings. The charges being considered include disobeying a direct order, reckless endangerment, and destruction of government property. Do you understand? Sarah felt her stomach drop. Court-martial. The word carried enormous weight. It meant the end of her career, possibly prison time, certainly the end of everything she had worked for. I understand, she said softly. You'll be confined to quarters until we reach port in 3 days, Captain Morrison continued. At that time, you'll be transported back to Naval Air Station Ushana for a formal investigation. You're not to discuss this incident with anyone except your assigned legal counsel. Is that clear? Yes, sir. The guards escorted Sarah to her quarters, a tiny room with a bed, a desk, and nothing else. They locked the door behind her. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and put her head in her hands. She had known there would be consequences. She had known from the moment she flipped that switch that she was ending her career. But knowing it intellectually and facing it emotionally were two different things. Her phone had been confiscated, but she had been allowed to keep her personal effects. She pulled out the photograph of her father and stared at it. Did I do the right thing, Dad? She whispered. Or did I just throw everything away for nothing? The photograph, of course, offered no answer. For 3 days, Sarah sat in that room. Meals were brought to her. She was allowed to shower under guard supervision. But otherwise, she was alone with her thoughts. On the second day, something unexpected happened. A note was slipped under her door. It was written on a piece of notebook paper in crude handwriting. Captain Mitchell, thank you for saving my life. I got 2 kids at home I thought I'd never see again. You're a hero. Signed, Petty Officer James Rodriguez, SEAL Team 5. Sarah stared at the note for a long time. Then she carefully folded it and put it in her pocket. More notes came. They were smuggled to her somehow, slipped under the door when the guards changed shifts. Each one was from a different SEAL. Each one thanked her. Each one called her a hero. By the time the carrier reached port, Sarah had 17 notes. 17 men who had taken the risk to reach out to her, to tell her that her sacrifice had mattered. When they brought her off the carrier, Sarah expected to be met with shame and hostility. Instead, something strange happened. As she walked down the gangway, escorted by guards, a line of men stood at attention on the dock. Navy SEALs, dozens of them in full uniform, standing silently. As Sarah passed, one of them saluted her, then another, then all of them. Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to stop to say something, but the guards kept her moving. Still, she felt something shift inside her. Whatever happened next, whatever punishment they handed down, these men knew the truth. They knew what she had done and why. The flight back to Virginia was quiet. Sarah sat in the back of a military transport, once again alone with her thoughts. When they landed at Ushana, she was taken directly to the base commander's office. Rear Admiral Patricia Chun was waiting for her. Admiral Chun was in her late 50s, a career Navy officer with a reputation for being fair but firm. She had broken barriers herself, becoming one of the first female flag officers in the Navy. "Captain Mitchell," Admiral Chun said, gesturing to a chair, "please sit." Sarah sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. "I've read the reports," Admiral Chun continued. "All of them, the mission logs, the recordings, the statements from the SEALs, and the complaints from Commander Huckun." Sarah said nothing. There was nothing to say. "You're in a difficult position," Admiral Chun said carefully. "What you did was technically a violation of orders. There's no dispute about that, but the results speak for themselves. 267 SEALs came home, not one casualty. That's remarkable." "I did what I thought was right, ma'am," Sarah said quietly. "I believe you did." Admiral Chun leaned back in her chair. "But here's the problem. The Navy runs on discipline, on following orders. If we let every pilot make their own judgment calls about when to break protocol, we'd have chaos. You understand that, don't you?" "Yes, ma'am." "So we have to do something. We have to show that there are consequences for disobeying orders, no matter how noble the intentions." Admiral Chun paused. "But we also have to consider the whole picture. The SEAL community is putting enormous pressure on us. They want you commended. Not court-martialed. Some of the most senior officers in special operations are calling personally to vouch for you." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. Was there a chance, a way out of this? "Here's what's going to happen," Admiral Chen said. "You're going to face a formal board of inquiry. They will investigate every aspect of the mission. They will determine whether your actions were justified or reckless, and then they will make a recommendation." "When?" Sarah asked. 2 weeks. In the meantime, you're grounded. No flights, no active duty. You'll remain here on base. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. "Off the record, Captain, I think you're a hell of a pilot, and I think you saved a lot of lives, but I also think you knew exactly what you were doing when you flipped that switch. You knew it would end your career. That takes guts. Stupid guts, maybe, but guts nonetheless." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, ma'am." Those 2 weeks were the longest of Sarah's life. She stayed in her quarters on base, venturing out only to eat at the mess hall or to walk the perimeter of the flight line. She watched other pilots take off and land and felt a deep ache in her chest. Would she ever fly again? The evening before her hearing, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. A knock on her door revealed Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the pilot who had mocked her before the mission. "Mitchell," he said awkwardly, "can I come in?" Sarah stepped aside and let him enter. Webb looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I wanted to say something before tomorrow," he began. "I was wrong about you. I said some things, made some assumptions, and I was wrong." Sarah waited. "What you did up there," Webb continued, "that took guts, real guts. Most of us would have followed orders and lived with the guilt. You put everything on the line for guys you'd never met. That's what being a warrior means, and I'm sorry I didn't see it before." "Thank you," Sarah said simply. Webb nodded and left. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it. Maybe, just maybe, some good had come from all of this. Maybe she had changed a few minds. The next morning, Sarah dressed in her formal uniform and walked to the hearing room. Her heart pounded as she entered. The board consisted of 3 senior officers, a Navy captain, a Marine colonel, and Admiral Chen herself. Commander Harkin was there, representing the prosecution's perspective. But to Sarah's surprise, there was another officer present, a Navy SEAL captain named Derek Thornton. He was there, she learned, to represent the perspective of the men she had saved. The hearing lasted 4 hours. They went through every detail of the mission, every decision Sarah had made, every consequence of her actions. Harkin argued passionately that she had been reckless, that she had endangered the mission, that she had violated the chain of command. Captain Thornton argued just as passionately that she had been heroic, that she had made the only choice that could save his men, that she deserved a medal, not a court-martial. Finally, it was Sarah's turn to speak. She stood and faced the board. "I knew what I was doing," she said clearly. "I knew I was violating orders. I knew I was risking my career. But I also knew that if I didn't act, men would die. American warriors. Men with families, with children, with futures. And I couldn't live with that. So yes, I broke the rules. And I'd do it again." The room was silent. Admiral Chen leaned forward. "Captain Mitchell, if every pilot acted on their own judgment, ignoring orders, we'd have chaos." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah agreed. "But there are moments when the rules don't cover the reality, when you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. I made my choice. I'll accept whatever consequences come from it." The board deliberated for an hour. Sarah waited outside, her stomach in knots. Finally, they called her back in. Admiral Chen stood. Her face was unreadable. "Captain Sarah Mitchell," she began formally. "This board has reviewed all evidence and testimony regarding your actions during Operation Guardian Shield. We find that you did, in fact, violate direct orders and activate a banned weapons system without authorization." Sarah's heart sank. "However," Admiral Chen continued, and her expression softened, "we also find that your actions directly resulted in the successful extraction of 267 Navy SEALs who would otherwise have been killed or captured. Your tactical judgment, while unconventional, was sound. Your flying skills under enemy fire were exceptional, and your courage was beyond question." Sarah barely dared to breathe. "Therefore, this board recommends the following. You will receive a formal reprimand in your service record for violation of orders. You will be grounded for 90 days, and then you will return to active flight status." "Ma'am," Sarah couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "Additionally," Admiral Chen said, and now she was smiling, "you're being awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. Congratulations, Captain. You're dismissed." Sarah stood there, stunned. The Navy Cross. It was the second highest military decoration for valor. They were giving her a medal. She saluted sharply. "Thank you, ma'am." As she left the hearing room, Captain Thornton was waiting outside. He was a big man, battle-scarred and tough-looking, but his eyes were warm. "Captain Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "From me and my men, thank you. You gave us our lives back." Sarah shook his hand, too emotional to speak. But as she walked out of the building into the Virginia sunshine, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The 90-day grounding period was both a punishment and a gift. Sarah spent the time teaching at the Naval Air Station, passing on her knowledge to younger pilots. She also spent it healing, processing everything that had happened. The Navy Cross ceremony was held 6 weeks after the hearing. It was a formal affair, held at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Sarah stood in her dress uniform while a 4-star admiral pinned the medal to her chest. Her brother Danny was there, tears in his eyes. Her mother had flown in from Seattle, her face a mixture of pride and worry. After the ceremony, something unexpected happened. As Sarah greeted well-wishers in the reception hall, a group of men in dress uniforms approached. They were the SEALs she had saved. More than 50 of them had come. One by one, they shook her hand. One by one, they thanked her. Some showed her pictures of their children. Others told her about the lives they got to keep living because of her choice. "My daughter graduated high school last month," one grizzled Master Chief said, his voice thick with emotion. "I got to walk her down the aisle. I got to see her face when she got her diploma. Because of you." Sarah found herself crying, something she rarely did. These men, these warriors, were showing her a vulnerability that most people never saw. They were sharing their humanity with her. But not everyone at the ceremony was supportive. Sarah noticed Commander Harkin standing in the corner, his arms crossed, his face set in disapproval. When their eyes met, he looked away. He had fought against her medal, she knew. He had argued that.